Sold out, every single seat, every breath suspended. Eala didn't just arrive at Roland Garros 2026, she detonated it. A 20-year-old from the Philippines, world number 45, raised on red clay at the Rafa Nadal Academy, and suddenly the most electric name in Paris. Not Sabalenka, not Goff, Eala. Chris Evert, the woman who owns 7 Roland Garros trophies, the undisputed queen of Parisian clay, a legend who has watched every era of women's tennis with surgical precision, stood in the commentary booth, microphone in hand, and went completely, utterly silent. What in the world just happened on court Philippe-Chatrier? Stay until the final second of this video, because what unfolded at Roland Garros 2026 isn't just a sports story, it's a generational earthquake, and you were here to witness it. There is a particular kind of hunger that only poverty, pressure, and purpose can manufacture together. Eala carries all 3 inside every swing. Born in Manila, Philippines, on May 23, 2005, Alexandra Eala grew up watching a sport where her nation had never produced a true Grand Slam contender. Tennis in Southeast Asia was a peripheral dream, something for television audiences, not local heroes. But her family believed differently. Her father, Michael, poured everything into the possibility that his daughter could become something unprecedented, not just good, not just regional, historically significant. At age 14, Eala received the call that reshapes destinies, an invitation to join the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, the same facility that forged the most ferocious clay court champion the sport has ever witnessed. Every morning she woke before dawn, trained on the very surfaces Nadal mastered, absorbed the same relentless philosophy of controlled aggression and physical domination that made Rafa untouchable for 2 decades. She absorbed it completely. At 16, Eala became the first Filipino to capture a Grand Slam title, the 2022 French Open girls doubles crown, partnering with Russia's Oksana Selhekmedova. Paris clay was not foreign soil, it was already hers. She had already tasted victory at Roland Garros before most girls her age had won anything of consequence. But junior success and senior survival are separated by a canyon. The professional tour breaks young players systematically, methodically, without mercy. Rankings are everything. Injuries are constant. Funding runs thin. Momentum evaporates. Eala refused every single one of those familiar disasters. She climbed. Slowly at first, but then with volcanic acceleration. By early 2025, she announced herself at the Miami Open in a run that shocked the tennis establishment, defeating ranked opponents back-to-back, exhibiting a baseline ferocity that felt incompatible with someone her age. Her forehand, flat, deep, struck at angles that defied conventional geometry, became whispered about in the locker rooms across the WTA circuit. She entered Roland Garros 2026 for her main draw debut and fell in the opening round to Emiliana Arango. Heartbreaking, expected, and ultimately irrelevant, because what the defeat revealed wasn't weakness. It revealed readiness. She belonged on that court. The scoreline was wrong. The level was undeniable. 12 months of relentless preparation separated that exit from what came next. By April 2026, Eala stood ranked world number 45. She had secured her Roland Garros 2026 main draw spot with enough margin to build a full clay campaign around it. Madrid, Rome, Parma, a deliberate, structured assault on form and fitness before Philippe-Chatrier called her name again. This wasn't accidental. This was engineered, and Paris was about to find out exactly what she had built. Roland Garros 2026 opened on May 18th with the usual choreography of champions and favorites. Sabalenka, dominant and volcanic. Goff, technically precise and impossibly composed. Swiatek, rehabilitating her clay authority under the shadow of Francisco Roig's new coaching blueprint. The narratives were already written. The storylines were locked. Nobody wrote Eala into the lead role. Which is precisely why what happened devastated the script so completely. The draw was announced, Eala's name appeared, seated outside the top 30, facing opponents who existed precisely to eliminate players still finding their footing, standard procedure, expected progression, except she didn't follow the procedure. Her opening match was a declaration of hostile intent. The baseline exchanges she constructed weren't defensive, they were prosecutorial. She dissected her opponent's weaknesses inside 20 minutes, adjusted mid-set with the tactical clarity of a player who had studied this specific human being for hours, and then closed with a level of ruthless efficiency that drew audible reactions from the crowd. The crowd. That is where everything changed, because Paris noticed. The Filipino community across Europe had mobilized with a ferocity that the tournament staff genuinely hadn't anticipated. Thousands of supporters carrying Filipino flags, wearing matching yellow shirts, waving banners that stretched across entire sections of grandstand seating. They were loud in a way that Roland Garros crowds, traditionally measured, connoisseur-like, reserved for genuine moments of greatness, rarely permit of any single player outside the absolute elite. But here's what nobody predicted. The French crowd adopted her too. Paris has a particular relationship with underdogs who play with artistry and fire. The city that housed Yannick Noah's tears in 1983, that elevated Monica Seles to goddess status through sheer brilliance, that eventually forgave and then adored Rafael Nadal despite his Spanish origins. Paris chose Eala, not because of nationality, because of expression. She played with joy, visible, uncontained, infectious joy, the kind that radiates from someone who understands precisely how improbable their presence is and refuses to treat the privilege carelessly. Every winner drew from her a fist pump that started at her hip and finished somewhere above her head. Every clutch hold produced celebration that felt authentic rather than performed. Social media erupted. Hashtag Eala Roland Garros trended across 12 countries by the end of her second match. Filipino sports journalists who had booked return flights after the first week frantically rescheduled departures. Mainstream European outlets that would never have assigned a correspondent to cover an unseeded Asian player in a typical year, began filing dispatches about the girl from Manila who was quietly dismantling the established order of the draw. But none of it prepared anyone for what Chris Evert was about to say. Here is what the television footage missed, what the broadcast couldn't capture. After the post-match ceremony, after the crowd began dissolving back into the Parisian afternoon, Chris Evert remained in conversation with a colleague near the commentary position. A journalist who had covered Roland Garros for 2 decades was present. According to their subsequent account, Evert spoke without calculation, the words of someone processing rather than performing. "Tennis has been waiting for this," she said. "Not just the Philippines, the whole sport. We needed something new. We needed to feel this again, this thing where someone comes out of nowhere and the crowd just surrenders to them. Seles had it, Hingis had it early, even I had it in 1974 when nobody knew who I was." She paused. "Alex has it. She has the thing. And Roland Garros has always known when someone has the thing." The thing, Evert referenced, has no clinical definition. Analysts have attempted frameworks: court presence, competitive temperament, athletic charisma, the ability to perform at maximum under maximum pressure. None of those frameworks fully captures what the crowd at Philippe-Chatrier responded to across those 2 weeks. What Eala projected was authenticity, complete, unmodified, unrehearsed authenticity. She celebrated without self-consciousness. She competed without manufactured intensity. When she struggled visibly and then solved the problem visibly, and the crowd followed every step of that internal process as though watching a narrative unfold rather than an athletic contest. The legacy Chris Evert built at Roland Garros rested on a different foundation: immaculate technical execution, emotional control so complete it approached inscrutability, a consistency that wore opponents down across years rather than electrifying audiences across days. Evert the player and Eala the player are stylistically separated by everything except one essential commonality. Both arrived at Roland Garros with the clay already inside them. Evert won it through mastery. Eala was attempting to win it through revelation. And in Evert's speechlessness, in that involuntary pause before the words found her, a champion who had spent half a century at this tournament recognized something she had not witnessed since the days when she herself was young, and the clay courts of Paris were still discovering what she was capable of, a passing. Not of a torch, that language is too ceremonial, too conclusive, something more organic. Recognition across generations, the understanding that what the sport required and what one young woman from Manila was currently providing were the same thing. Roland Garros 2026 would not be forgotten. Not by the players, not by the city, not by the legend sitting in the commentary booth who found herself, for the first time in decades, without immediate words. What does it mean when a country finds itself in a sport? Not competitively participates, finds itself, discovers something about its own identity reflected back through the performance of one individual on a specific stage in a specific moment under the most scrutinizing conditions professional sport provides. The Philippines found itself at Roland Garros 2026. In Eala's forehands, Filipino athletes across every discipline found permission to believe in sizes of ambition previously considered geographically inappropriate. In her navigation of pressure, the weight of national expectation carried on shoulders still shaping themselves, young Filipino girls watching on screens in Manila and Cebu and Davao understood that the world's grandest stages are not closed to them by geography or history or the absence of precedent. Precedent, after all, is simply waiting for someone to create it. Eala's journey to this point was built on relentless, unglamorous work. The early mornings at the Rafa Nadal Academy when no cameras existed to document the repetitions, the losses that preceded the victories, the first-round exits, the early round defeats in WTA 125 events, the gradual, painstaking construction of a game capable of competing on the highest surfaces at the highest pressure. Her sole professional title had come at the Guadalajara Open, a 125-tier event, important, meaningful, but miles removed from a Roland Garros run that silenced Chris Evert. Eala earned every inch of this distance. And Chris Evert, the woman who holds 7 titles at this tournament, whose name is permanently fused with Parisian clay, who watched Navratilova and Graf and Celis and Hingis and Williams and Sharapova and Halep and Swiatek each leave their indelible signatures on this place, recognized in Eala something that transcends rankings, transcends win-loss records, transcends even the specific outcome of this specific fortnight. She recognized a player who had arrived at Roland Garros not to participate, but to belong. The sold-out crowds, the Filipino banners painted across grandstand sections, the French spectators abandoning their traditional impartiality, the trending hashtags across continents, the pre-dawn viewing parties in Manila, none of that existed before Eala walked onto Philippe-Chatrier and began dismantling the established understanding of who this tournament belongs to. It belongs to the willing. Always has. The red clay of Roland Garros does not care about nationality or seeding or the weight of prior expectation. It responds to the player who understands it most completely, who respects its demands without fearing them, who brings the physical and psychological tools to survive its particular cruelties and harvest its particular rewards. Roland Garros 2026 gave the world a new name to say with reverence: Alexandra Eala. World number 45, age 20, Philippine national treasure. And somewhere in Paris, a 7 champion found herself speechless, not from disappointment, not from confusion, but from the most profound emotion available to those who dedicate their lives to a sport. The recognition that what they loved is still alive, still capable of astonishing them, still producing moments that strip language away and leave only silence where words previously lived without effort. The next generation does not knock politely. It arrives, on red clay, under Parisian sky, with a flag and 115 million people screaming its name. And the legends who built the sport stand back and go quiet. Was this the moment the Philippines permanently changed the geography of women's tennis, or just the beginning of a story that hasn't reached its most devastating chapter yet? Drop your answer below. Eala walked into Roland Garros 2026 ranked number 45 in the world. She departed as something no ranking can measure, a cultural phenomenon, a generational catalyst, the player who silenced Chris Evert with tennis so pure it temporarily erased the vocabulary of a 7 champion. The red clay remembered her. Paris remembered her. The sport will not forget what she built here. If this story moved you, subscribe, because the Eala chapter is far from finished. The greatest moments are still ahead, and you do not want to miss any one.